Sure, you've heard about loop engineering. It all started with the bald man, Forrest Turney. Sorry about that. He went on a podcast and he doesn't even write code anymore. Coding is solved. Loops are the future. Pre-AI, the way things were. Human writes the code, post-AI. I think we're all familiar with this, right? And so post-loop engineering effectively would be human writes the loop. So our involvement pre-AI was, probably 100%, right? We had to write every single line. Nowadays, our involvement is effectively 0%, at least on the coding side. We do have still 100% on the design portion for the most part. There's some decisions the AI makes for the design, but really you are in control over that portion. People argue that we're losing engineers because of this, but I personally think otherwise. I'm of the opinion that we actually need more engineers post-AI, but less bloat. And by that, I mean pre-AI, it was assumed that anytime you want to build something scalable and large, you need a team. A single human being could not possibly write a full-scale app unless they spend many, many, many years on it, right? If it's a personal project, sure. But if we're talking about a company that pays you and needs to make money in return, this is not possible with one person. It's assumed you need a team, which in my opinion is just straight bloat. Because the thing is, you could have two engineers that are just perfect for each other. They're just operating on the same wavelength, kind of like the Step Brothers clip. You could envision a world where you have engineers that are like this. And I think everyone knows somebody like this. You have a friend or somebody you've worked with where it's just like everything clicks. But even in that world, it's impossible for these two engineers to see eye to eye in a way that is cohesive. I have another video where I talked about, I can't remember what I titled. I think it was like solo is better, where I kind of alluded to the idea that teams are good. Like you definitely want teams for a large scale product if you can, but there's creative aspects that benefit greatly from it being one person. Every time you're adding a person to a team, and even if it's like this, there's bloat to it. Additional work, you have to agree on things. You can't step on each other's toes, which this often happens. You end up working on separate features because it's kind of just, it's very difficult to have two people working on the same feature. It's just a pain in the ass. Problem with assuming we need less engineers is disregarding of competition. If company A fires its engineers and focuses on status quo, which is what a lot of companies were trying to do at their initial stages of AI. They laid off a bunch of engineers. They could, we're just going to chill, guys. We're going to coast. If they do this for too long, what's going to happen is this company B, who is approaching it with a mindset of accelerating their existing engineers, they're going to end up winning because it's basic math. What is better than one engineer with AI? Two engineers with AI, right? And ultimately, when you have competition, it benefits you to stay on top with the talented engineers. You're going to just fire your engineers. You need them to stay afloat. Somebody's going to take your throne if you don't. Engineering, assuming it takes away our input and it puts us down to this level. Because right now, every prompt you send is a design choice. If we're no longer sending the prompts, the design choice then becomes mostly AI driven as well. And then we assume this 20% is for the actual creation of the loop, because somebody has to actually design the loop. I guess you could have one person write a loop and then they just reuse it. But I assume, here's the thing. Okay, let's be clear about what the loop is referring to. What does Boris mean by loop? In the current post-AI state, human prompts to AI, what does that look like? You send prompt A, AI does some shit, and then it returns to you. And it tells you like, hey, yeah, we did this, yada, yada, here's the result. Or maybe it runs into whatever. It comes back to you at the end of the day. And then you send prompt B. Really, the end goal of loop engineering, if you look at the day of an engineer, it would look like a bunch of prompts that were sent, is to loopify this part, right? So think like a for loop, or actually I guess this would be a while loop, where it's effectively just constantly taking the return, putting it back in, and then going from there. You would have some exit criteria. Like this while loop would execute. I guess we could change this to a variable while condition. And then like you'd set your condition to if test A and test B. This is just pseudocode, right? We're just assuming there's some convincing logic here. Maybe something like this. It would go forever and ever until it meets some condition. And so we, as loop engineers, assuming this was the reality, we would be defining this condition here, and it would just go and go and go. I think the question becomes, how would you define this to where you're completely hands off? At least right now, I'm thinking about it, and I feel like it'd be really hard to define a clear condition here, right? Because our current conditions for what matches, right? If we're going from prompt A to the return, and we deem this a good result, it's, do I like it, right? Does it look right? Does it feel right? I have to implement something and then I test it. Sometimes that's manual testing. With this, you would have to define that in a way that isn't a human feeling. You wouldn't be able to use the same conditions that we use now for loop engineering, because how is the AI going to know what feels good or what looks good? Thinking about it critically, I'm not sure how loop engineering would work in a real scenario, but let's assume it does, right? Let's just assume that this is possible. Let's assume we can define a condition that matches whatever we would define as our condition for each of our individual prompts. The problem I take with loop engineering is that because it takes away our design choices, it completely eliminates what makes something unique and interesting. Here's why I believe loop engineering is not the future. Ask yourself, what is art? I think this is kind of up to interpretation. And so this is the formal definition of art. Art is the conscious use of skill and creative imagination to produce aesthetic object, yada, yada. It doesn't matter what the formal definition is. At least for me, if I were to bog all this word salad down, I would just call it unique. This is my take on what art is. And uniqueness is, it doesn't have to be the most unique thing in the world, but to me, it needs to feel different. It needs to feel as though it wasn't something I've seen before. Art can come in many forms. You could have, let's say it's text. It could just be the ordering of the subject. It could be the word choice, right? The flow. There's so many variables that you have at your disposal to turn it into something unique. As a human being, it is impossible to create something and have it not be unique, right? At the end of the day, it ends up being a little bit different. If I took somebody else's song and I try to recreate it from scratch, at the end result will be very similar, and it'll sound, if you did a good job, it would sound just like the song, but there's going to be some slight deviation. And guess what? What I just said, it sounds bad to say, but majority of art is created by copying somebody else and failing at it. Every time I've sat down at a desk to do anything, whether it be create an app, make a video, whatever, it always started based off of an idea. This idea, and I'm not going to go deep into the weeds here because I could go on for 6 hours about this philosophical thought, but this idea is effectively a culmination of things that attempting to create. I encourage you to try this sometime. If you're like in a position where you don't know what to make, try to remake something that you like, and you'll probably find out by the end of it, you make something completely different. I don't think I've ever started a project where the initial intention was where it ended up at least not on a solo project. In team projects, it's a little bit different because usually you have like a customer that has a requirement. But if you're working on your own project, oftentimes the initial start ends up being a completely different endpoint at the end. And so what am I getting at here? If art is unique, in order for this to happen, we have to be able to make mistakes. We have to be able to come in between and fuck shit up. With the current state of design with AI, there's absolutely potential for somebody to make mistakes here, right? Because you get full control over the design, you have full opportunity to do something in a direction that's different from what we have today. Yes, the code is going to be ultimately a rendition of something that we've already done, but the culmination is going to be something that nobody could have thought about. With loop engineering, when we're reducing down to 20% of design choice, again, this is just a theoretical number, assuming we're down to 20%, instead of allowing the human to come in here and mess shit up, we're giving credence to the AI that is probably not going to make that mistake. Because the AI knows what is a pass and a fail, it's unlikely to make weird choices here that culminate into an interesting design. And so AI cannot do this part. I think there's still potential that you get an output that's unique, right? Think about all the combinations that could be, passed into each of these. But the level of human error is just, it's so insignificant compared to what we have with standard post-AI methods, especially with the new tools we have. If you look at old AI tools or old models barely listened, right? You could tell it an exact design and it's going to go off and do what it wants. It'll try to get to the end result, but the way it gets there, it's often not going to listen to your implementation choice. And there's this common debate in the dev space of like, okay, OpenAI models versus Anthropic models. I think we're all familiar. If you've used these models extensively, you'll know that, OpenAI models tend to be more by what you say, and Anthropic models tend to do a little bit more on its own. The way I like to describe it is that Anthropic models are more like Jesus take the wheel, and then OpenAI models are more like Jesus take the pedal, still giving it direction. Kimi K2 is also more on this side of listening. But these old models, they barely listen. The new models, dude, they are listening to everything you say. It gives more opportunity for human error. Boris Cherney seems to think, coding is just completely solved. I think there is value in loop engineering. I think there's certain applications where it's good, but particularly this is on the non-UX space. The question is, right, will loop engineering be the future? I think there's a place for it. And I think it's important to realize that this 20% is actually a lot still, right? You still need to decide what the exit condition is. And so even if you're not, giving direct input to each of these prompts, this part right here requires a human being. There's an article here from Adi Osmani, and he talks about what the loop can't do. But the reason I really don't see it being of value is kind of like what he's saying here, where the verification is still on you. Today, we say, hey, add this feature. We will go back and forth with the LM until we finally arrive at a point where the feature is done. This part right here is decided by us. This idea of loop engineering, really, it doesn't really change anything. We still have an ask and we still have an exit that we have to evaluate. Is no different from what we're doing today. I think we're going to find that the amount of actual human interaction we need for loop engineering is still the same, right? Yeah, it might go back and forth for a while, but how does it know it's done? It doesn't know until this. And then I have to send another prompt. And like he mentions here at the top, loop engineering is replacing yourself as the prompter. You're the one designing that looping system. But really, sit here and ask yourself, how would you design that? Like, let's say you're working on a video game, All right, let's imagine this is a video game, and I don't know what this game is for. Let's say you're a spaceship and you're shooting rocks or some shit, dude. How are you going to design a system that reliably achieves this part? At the end of the day, you have to send a prompt to the LM. Okay, so you might tell it, hey, I want some stars. I want a rock to shoot. I want a spaceship. How are you going to get it to reliably produce the end result? At the end of the day, it's going to spit something out at you. Maybe it prints this out, and instead of rocks, maybe the rocks weren't right? There's always some area where it's going to mess up on. And so you have to send another prompt to the LM saying, hey, this isn't quite right. And then it feels like we're not changing anything. It's the same thing. To me, it really feels like we're replacing prompt with loop. Both of these are the same, right? How does loop really differ from prompt? I feel like it's the same fucking concept. And kind of to the concept I alluded to earlier about how in order for art to exist, it really has to come from some form of human error. But I don't see us being able to inject the human error part into the LM for this, right? Because it needs to mess up to do something interesting. But here's the fun thing, right? A month from now, I could be all in on loops. And this is what I love about coding. And this is what I love about the advanced, like we are in the greatest time. Let's just address that. We are in the greatest freaking time period, man. It's a great time to be alive, dude. It feels like every month, sometimes even every week, we get a new model that just surprises us. Constantly hearing about new advancements. We are in the freaking best time ever because we get to experience all these crazy changes. Today, I'm all in on this part and saying, hey, this is kind of crazy. But there was a point in time where I was all in on this part and thinking this is crazy. So this could be, this could be the future. We don't know. Is there something here that I'm not seeing that you can see? Do you think the amount of effort that goes into designing this part is any different from what we're doing here? Or is it pretty much the same thing, but with some extra fluff?